Desmond Carter was never supposed to be home that morning. The International Finance Summit in Dubai should have kept him away for another 2 days. But when the final session ended earlier than expected, the grieving father did what his aching heart demanded. He boarded a red-eye flight without alerting press, driver, or even his staff. All he wanted was to surprise his little girl. By 9:47 a.m., he was stepping into the quiet, sunlit foyer of his Los Angeles estate. The mansion smelled faintly of fresh polish and linen candles. Too neat, too calm. His polished shoes clicked against the marble floor as he carried a white briefcase in one hand and in the other, a small pink teddy bear, the one his daughter had left in his car weeks ago. He pictured himself walking into the living room, kneeling behind her as she played, whispering, "Guess who's home?" But when he rounded the corner, the briefcase slipped from his hand and crashed to the floor. There, by the velvet couch, stood Mrs. Greta, his 50-something maid with her stern face set in stone and her black and white uniform crisp as ever. But she wasn't dusting or folding linen. Her arms were wrapped tightly around Ava, his 5-year-old daughter, and Ava was not laughing. Her small face was swollen and bruised, one eye nearly shut, her lips split, her little hand limp at her side. Her legs dangled lifelessly over Greta's arm. Desmond's heart seized. He rushed forward, nearly shoving Greta aside, and scooped Ava into his arms. The child whimpered, flinched, and buried her face into his chest as he whispered, trembling, "Baby girl, what happened to you?" Greta's cold reply cut the air. She fell again. Rage burned through him. "What did you do to her?" he snapped. Greta folded her arms. "Like I said, she's clumsy. Always has been." His hands shook as he dialed 911 with one arm wrapped protectively around his daughter. "Emergency," he forced out through clenched teeth. "My daughter is injured. 5 years old. Facial bruising. Possible broken ribs. Send an ambulance now." Within minutes, paramedics filled the living room. They carefully pried Ava from her father's arms as her sobs faded into weak moans. One medic glanced at Desmond, his eyes heavy with concern. "These injuries don't look accidental, sir." Desmond turned toward Greta, his face carved with fury. "You were supposed to protect her." Greta only shrugged. "She screams when she doesn't get her way. I disciplined her. You left her spoiled and without rules. I gave her what you wouldn't." Desmond stepped forward, fists clenched, but a police officer raised a hand between them. "Let us handle her, sir." As Greta was escorted into another room, Desmond sank onto the edge of the couch, his face buried in his hands. The once pristine white suit he had worn with pride was now smeared with his daughter's blood. His mind spiraled, replaying every overlooked moment, every unanswered question. How long had this been happening? Ava had been quieter lately, less playful on the phone. He had told himself it was grief, the lingering shadow of losing her mother. The tantrums, the nightmares, the silence, he had excused them all. Now the truth crashed into him like a train. Ava had tried to tell him. Weeks ago, she had pointed to a bruise on her knee and said, "Greta said I'm not fast enough." He thought it was a strange way to describe playtime, nothing more. He hadn't asked, hadn't listened. Now she bore a swollen cheek, bruises across her back, fractured ribs. He had trusted a polished resume and polite manners over his own daughter's subtle cries for help. And the guilt scorched through him like fire. Outside, the ambulance lights painted the driveway red and blue. Paramedics lifted Ava onto a stretcher. Her tiny hand reached for him, trembling. Desmond rushed to her side, clutching her fingers as tears slid down his face. "I'm here now," he whispered, voice breaking. "Daddy's not going anywhere." Ava squeezed once and whispered a single word. "Hurts." Desmond closed his eyes. It would never hurt again. Not if he could help it. The hospital reeked of antiseptic and heartbreak. He sat by her bedside in silence, no longer the immaculate millionaire, but a father stripped bare, dressed in simple clothes. His expensive white suit lay abandoned, stained with blood and shame. All night he stayed awake, haunted by the image of her limp body in Greta's arms, the purple bruise on her cheek, her faint whisper, "Hurts." Ava lay connected to an IV, her small frame wrapped in a blanket printed with tiny animals. Her face was swollen, lips stitched, one eye shut beneath bruises. The doctors confirmed his fear. 2 fractured ribs, a dislocated shoulder, and older wounds in different stages of healing. Not one accident, not one fall. A pattern of abuse. Greta had been arrested immediately, but Desmond wanted more than charges of assault. He wanted truth. He hired his own investigators. ordered his legal team to dig into her past. What surfaced chilled him. Greta Langford, 52. No prior convictions, no official complaints, but a trail of whispers. Several families who had once employed her spoke of harsh discipline, cruel punishments, things they had buried and moved on from. One mother admitted Greta once locked her son in a pantry because he refused to eat. Another recalled firing her quietly after discovering bruises on her child. 7 families, 7 children scarred in silence. None had pursued charges. And Desmond realized he had nearly allowed Ava to become the 8th forgotten child, swallowed by a cycle of unreported cruelty. 2 days later, Desmond stood in the courtroom. Greta sat shackled in handcuffs, her once crisp uniform replaced by a drab prison jumpsuit. Her hair was disheveled, but her expression was the same, cold, unflinching, unapologetic. When given the chance to speak, Desmond rose. He faced the judge with a calm but raw voice that carried across the chamber. "She wasn't just my employee," he said. "I trusted her with my daughter's life. I gave her my keys, my schedule, my home, believing Ava would be safe. But I missed the signs, and for that I will carry guilt for the rest of my life. But my daughter," his voice faltered, then steadied. "She will heal, because she's stronger than the woman who tried to break her." He turned then, his eyes locking on Greta with a hard, unyielding stare. "You used silence as your weapon. You chose a child who had already lost her mother, believing no one would believe her. But you didn't count on me coming home. You didn't count on karma," Desmond had said, his voice low but steady, "and now you'll face both." The court sentenced Greta Langford to 12 years in prison without the possibility of parole for felony child abuse, with additional charges reopened from her past cases. Yet Desmond didn't celebrate. There was no victory in the verdict, only a release, a breath he hadn't been able to take for days. When he returned home, the mansion felt cavernous, too big and too cold. Ava's toys sat untouched in the playroom, her drawings of Daddy and me still taped to the refrigerator. Next to them, the sticker chart Greta had once twisted into a tool of cruelty remained as a chilling reminder. But Desmond was not the same man anymore. He had money, power, and influence, but none of it had saved his daughter. What saved her was a whisper from a bruised child. So he chose to use his resources differently. He created the Ava Carter Trust, a foundation designed to protect children by funding background checks, unannounced evaluations, and anonymous reporting systems for domestic workers in family homes. Partnering with lawmakers, he pushed for statewide oversight of in-home caregivers, and at home, he devoted himself to the one voice that mattered most, Ava's. Her words were hesitant at first, soft and uncertain, but they grew stronger every day. Together, they rebuilt their bond. They read books at night, shared breakfasts in the kitchen, and spent afternoons on the floor surrounded by puzzles. Ava clung to him as though the world might disappear if she let go, and Desmond vowed never to leave her side again. One quiet afternoon, weeks later, Ava picked up a crayon and placed it in his hand. "Draw with me, Daddy." He smiled, taking the purple crayon between his fingers. "What should I draw?" he asked. Ava thought for a moment, then whispered, "Draw me, but happy this time." Desmond's chest ached, not from grief, but from the slow, miraculous weight of healing. Greta had tried to steal Ava's voice, but she had not silenced her spirit. And in that moment, Desmond made a promise. No one would ever hurt his daughter again. And if they tried, the whole world would hear about it.